software for contractors to track job cost and timesheets. For the contractor owner, time is really the most valuable asset you have. And if we don't have a metric for tracking our time and putting a value to it, then that time will just fly away. Timesheet data without applying it to a job, that's just payroll. But timesheet data applied to an actual job, that's job costing. By the end of this video, you're going to know how timesheet tracking merges with job costing, why both of those are important, and how to make every hour that your crew works tell you something that's useful. So we were talking with a framer one time, and we were trying to diagnose the frustration that he was feeling. We had got done speaking, and he came up and he goes, "Man, I need to talk." And so we started to talk. And here was the issue that he said. He said, "Man, I get on these jobs, I do all this estimating, and then I get out there and I never have enough money to pay the guys that are on the jobs." And so we started to dig and asked him about basic job costing. He's like, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, basic job costing is just seeing the amount that you put on the contract value and what you actually spent, what the variance between those two are. Basically, was it profitable?" And he goes, "I've never done that." You would be amazed at the number of contractor business owners that run $1 million a year, $10 million a year, even $50 million a year. That job costing is not a part of what they do. They just sort of guess from job to job if they're profitable, and they live under that contractor myth that if there's money in the bank, then I must be making money. The more we dug, the more we realized that this guy was estimating group labor hours of 50, but he would actually pay the guys for 70 or 75. There was an overrun that was just eating and eating and eating away all these jobs that he was doing. So we've got to do something different. In job costing, we can't just look at general cost of goods. We actually have to account for timesheets because it impacts one of the most important metrics within our job cost. And remember what job costing is? It's just identifying, is this job profitable or not? So the first thing I want to do is actually go the opposite direction. I want to work from the right side of the sheet, and I want to come back and start to uncover some of these calculations that you want to have if you want to merge these job sheets, timesheets, with proper job costing to make sure that you account for the labor hours that are on a job. So let's start over here in what we call the SLME. S-L-M, I know we don't have an I, but an E down here. What is that? Well, these two up here are the people elements of your cost of goods, and these two down here are the non-people elements of your cost of goods. So every job gets costed this way: subcontractors, labor, material, and equipment. And with your equipment, it could be your equipment, or it could be rented equipment. So you need to cost code that and get with your accountant on how that looks. Super important because it's got tax advantages, it's got profitability advantages either way. So make sure that you've got clarity on whose equipment, when it gets used, and how it actually gets costed to a job. Then up here, we've got materials. It's pretty straightforward as to what that is. And then we have labor and subcontractors. We get a lot of confusion around this. People go, "Well, what's the difference?" Well, subcontractors is pretty straightforward. It's the sub and the sub crews that you would hire on a particular project to come and actually do some of the install work. But the labor may be a little bit more interesting, and this is where timesheets come in. Now, if you hire a sub crew, the crew foreman should be the one dealing with the time and the timesheets and everything else. But if you've got labor that sits within your business, they're W-2 employees, but they get added to a cost of goods line item within the job cost sheet, then we need to track their timesheet because we need to know exactly how many hours for that labor are going into this particular project. Why? It's because it tells us if the job is profitable or not. Because if we've got all the subcontractor costs, we've got all the material costs, we've got all the equipment costs, but we don't have the labor cost in there, we don't know truly if that project is profitable. And we need to know if that project is profitable based on that. This happens a lot of times when contractor companies spread out into other geographies and they have multiple offices, and the home office ends up carrying the expenses for some of the satellite office, and the satellite offices don't tab those costs to the actual projects coming out of those. So the business in large looks profitable, even though location A may not be profitable at all. And so that's why we've got to understand and take this labor and apply it to our job costs to make sure that it's a true number. And so we've got our subs, labor, material, and equipment. That's basic job costing to determine the cost of goods. And so we look at a contract value of a job, we subtract our cost of goods out of it, and our cost of goods largely going to make up of the SLME over here. That's going to equal our gross profit. Now, what impacts that? That's when we get the labor involved in looking at timesheets. So when we come back from here, we need here what we call a true labor cost. So it's not just the subcontractors, as I mentioned, but it's also that labor that we attach to a job. So in order to find that, there are two things we need to know. Number one is we need to know what job number. What job is this? Is this 3121 Maple? Is this job number 3657-A? What job number is this? So we put the job number here, and so I'm just going to put 3121 as the job number, and then we're going to take the labor hours over here. So I'm putting a multiplication here, that's kind of irrelevant. So we take the labor hours on this job, that gets us a true labor cost outside of our subcontractors, our materials, and our equipment. And so when we see that labor cost in here, this is where software can be a great value add for us. And by software, it's anything from a spreadsheet that you build on your own all the way to an expensive software that you can bring in. But when you're talking about it or when you're building it out, and you're talking about it with the demo company or you're building it out on your own, you want to make sure that true labor cost accounts for these elements that are up here, because these are the elements that are going to be factors in your final job costing. Contract value minus cost of goods equals your gross profit. And then your gross profit from there, we want to come down here and we want to subtract your overhead, and ultimately that's going to lead to the net income or the profitability of the job that we're looking for. Why am I spending so much time on this labor issue right here? Because labor issues are typically one of the highest drivers of cost variance on a project when you're doing job costing. It is way easy for a group of people just to stay on a job for another hour. Well, if you had 10 people on a job for an additional hour, that's 10 labor hours that you did not account for in your initial contract value that are going to be coming out of your cost of goods. So you can immediately see where this doesn't just subtly start to add up. This can actually compound over time. And you know what's really bad? Is none of those folks are going to work for free. They're going to expect and demand to be paid, and that payment's going to have to come from somewhere. And once that's exhausted, that's when we get into real problems and start to borrow revolving lines of credit that never stop revolving. And so we've got to stay on top of our job costing. If you want to be a contractor business owner that really understands how to run a profitable business, then you need to be excellent at job costing, particularly around this idea of timesheets and making sure that you've got your labor accounted for in the subs, labor, material, and equipment. The bad thing about contractors who are in short cycle times, you know, they have 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, is sometimes you can't catch if there's overage, but the good news is it's only 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days. So it's short overages, even if they did go over. The tough part about long-term cycle times, 10-month build, a 16-month build, is you can lose track of this pretty quick, and the next thing you know, you look up. But with a long cycle build, you also have time to identify this thing if you can get on top of your job costing and begin to rein that in and start to reset your subcontractors or your labor that's been applied to that job, so you can minimize the costs that are associated with it. When it comes to job profitability, one of the fastest ways to lose money is labor, but one of the fastest ways to increase your margin is labor and managing that labor as well. When you look at a project and go, hey guys, I budgeted 10 hours for this, but I really think we can do this in 8. In fact, I'll offer you a bonus incentive if you can complete this in 8 instead of 10. Now, the bonus incentive isn't what they would get at 10, but it's a fraction, but they didn't have to work those extra 2 hours to be able to do that. So you can be really creative around some of this stuff when you're talking about trying to minimize the cost, increasing the value, but you can't do it unless you know your numbers. All right, so there's 3 elements that we're merging together here. Timesheets, true job costing with the costs that go in, and then the software that goes around it. I want you to go this way. Before you ever get to the software that's down here, I want you to get to the training of how to actually do the job costing right here. But before the job costing, we need to process out what that job costs look like. Many of you think you have a software problem. You do not. You have a process problem that never got translated into an effective job costing methodology. And that job costing methodology was not there to inform the software that you bought, so that when you integrated the software, lo and behold, the software doesn't do what you need it to do. And so this all sits within a greater whole. In fact, this one process is just one of hundreds of processes. So now what I want you to do is go to the link in the description below. I've got a video for you called How to Build a System for Your Construction Business. Job costing is just one process within all of that, but I want you to see where job costing fits within the 4 foundational cornerstones of your business and the 4 core systems of your business: marketing, sales, ops, and admin. If you haven't gone through that, you need to go through it. Click on the link in the description below. And what it will help you do is get out of the chaos that you feel in job costing or running a construction business and be liberated from that chaos to make time for the things that matter most.